All right, welcome back, everybody. We are back with Gene for part 2 of his story. We got the background last time, and we are now on the way to, I guess, the deconstruction. How Gene ended up where he is today, and how did he end up being the guy that's friends with everybody on Facebook and that everybody knows. So yeah, let's jump in. So last we heard you had a calling. You had a calling in the nursery, which you really liked, and then you got a calling as the janitor. And I think that was that part of it. And it kind of starts to go from there, besides the other things we've already kind of built up on your shelf.
So yeah, actually as a janitor, there was, I mean, this is kind of gross, but there was some people left, let's say, a mess instead of being respectful, like as part of a member that takes care of the building. They just left a mess and went on their way. And I had to get help to clean it up. I couldn't do it by myself. And so it was like, in a way, it was just like a shock. It was almost like a nothing that's the final straw. And so, but that just set me up so that when I had been listening to Mormon stories, and John Dehlin was actually keeping me going to church and saying, you could just be on a date and hold your wife's hand. And if somebody says something bad, you can just go with it. And then when Kay Kelly got excommunicated, I stopped paying tithing. I told my wife I couldn't pay tithing. And then when John Dehlin got excommunicated, I just couldn't stand to support men that would act like schoolyard children, saying, if you don't play by my rules, I'm taking my ball, home, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like if you had a good position, then you should argue in the court of public opinion instead of just silencing people. And so I stopped attending, and my wife at the time, Michelle, wouldn't, well, she's still my wife, but she couldn't understand exactly what I was talking about, why I thought the leaders were apostate. And,
she's all in still.
Yeah, she's all
the
in.
Ordained Women movement.
She is dutiful. She didn't want me to talk about the Ordained Women movement at church for the past years. And she just, our job as Mormons were to do what leaders said to do, not to think for ourselves, not to do anything, not to question anything. And
that's where I was too.
She was very good at being the secretary, because it's a job where you don't have to think very much. You just take the role, you do your assignments, you set up meetings, you call people. It was easy to do. She didn't have to pray to see if God wanted a certain person in a teaching position or to be a co-leader or whatever. And so she was in a sweet spot, as far as that goes. I think it was Stake Relief Society secretary at that time. And then I actually had a condition where drinking coffee, having caffeine, was recommended to me by a doctor. So I had a doctor's excuse.
I've heard of that before.
To start drinking coffee. And, at that time, unfortunately, my mom had passed away, and she had been, she kind of did with my dad, kind of a, if you can't beat them, join them situation for like the prior 20 years. So she would drink a little and not, care about going to church and stuff like that. And so she had purchased a lot of coffee. And, but one thing that I didn't mention, I don't think, is that my last time getting a temple recommend was around 2010, 11 or something. And at the time I was not very much believing, because I had talked about the priesthood issue and thinking that women should be ordained, because it's going to happen. If it took 100 years for blacks to be accepted by God, God loves women too. And maybe women are going to get the priesthood soon. And so, but she had some people encourage her to get her endowment when she was basically, acting like a single mother, taking all of her 5 boys to church. there wasn't a situation. Your husband had to sort of like take you to the temple back then, and
Yeah.
there wasn't a push. Around the 90s, I heard of some other women in similar situation that were working in the temple. Like, you're working in the temple? Your husband's been inactive, and how are you working in the temple? Oh, they got their endowments without their husband being there. And so anyhow, I'm kind of jumbling everything together, but I did go to my mom's endowment, and I figured out how to answer the temple recommend questions. Like, do you support the, prophets, seers, and revelators? And it's like, well, that's their title, and I'm not against them. So yeah. Are you sinning? I didn't sin on the way to this meeting, so I'm good as far as I'm concerned. Maybe I would say a little prayer before the interview and ask for forgiveness. And so I was all good. I didn't have to say anything to the bishop. So anyhow, but my mom passing, I don't know if she went back to coffee or whatever, but she had a bunch of coffee that I inherited. And so I was able to get my caffeine for free, which is a very important value in my values, economy. And so I was drinking coffee. I got a job where I could wear headphones and listen to YouTube, but I was listening to like Katy Perry and, pop music and stuff, and doing my job and just kind of like zoning out. And then COVID happened, and I hadn't listened to very much John DeLynn. And I thought, well, I'll go back to listening to John DeLynn, and probably popped up on the side, as a recommendation. And he had changed his tune since even just right after getting excommunicated.
Yeah.
There was so much more information coming out. He had interviewed Dan Vogel, church historian, a historian about, wrote a book about Joseph Smith, and other people were coming on, and I was learning about the second anointing and some other things. And then the excommunication of Bishop Sam Pinson came on. And at this time in my children's lives, I had sent 3 children on missions. And so it was way better than just Michelle and I going on. We had overpaid already for our missions, but the youngest had sort of failed to launch a couple times on going on a mission. Different family problems cropped up, and he was back to the singles ward and was thinking about going again. And I wanted him to go, get out of the house, learn a language, grow,
get some life experience. Yeah.
Get some life experience. And I said to him, but I just started listening to Bishop Sam Pinson. I want you to check it out because it's interesting, right? And so he started listening to it and with me, but like I didn't know about 1.5 times speed and stuff. And so like later that day, he said, yeah, I'm already done with it, and I had only heard like here and there bits. It's like, you're ahead of me now. But anyhow, at the end of that series, I was in shock in a way. I was thinking, wow, it's possible the church isn't true. I had been arguing with my other son, Derek, about how I recognized that changes need to be made in the church, and I wanted to be a modern Mormon Martin Luther, that there needs to be a list of things. And we would argue, and I said, he said, well, if you had 100 things that you wanted the church to change, how many of them would it take for you to start going back? And I was thinking, well, a third of them wouldn't be enough. 2/3 would be like a sweet spot. If all 100 of my recommendations occurred, the church isn't true, because I should be the prophet. If I'm the one that knows more about the current prophets, then, so it had to be like a happy medium. Like maybe I'm wrong somewhere about these 100 things, you know. But anyhow, so and Derek hadn't been going to church since like a few years after his mission because he said he was bored. And I was like, being bored is part of celestial training. You have to prove, you have to sacrifice. You know,
Yeah.
you can't just say I don't want to go to church because it's bored. It's strengthening you. It's, you know, increasing your mettle, right? And so
Yeah, and I would have thought if it's boring, it's my fault because I'm not like prepared. I'm not in the right mind frame. Maybe I didn't study the lessons ahead of time. If I'd done that, I would have been, yeah. So yeah,
yeah,
I thought the same.
so
That's not a
so all
reason
these
not to
things
go.
were coming into, you know, and so I started listening to all the Mormon stories that I hadn't in my job instead of Katy Perry. And so I was I was wowed with all the information and everybody was telling, you know, similar stories. They were mentioning the CES letter. What's a CES letter? They were mentioning the church essays. I don't think I knew about the church essays by 2020. Of course, I hadn't been to church very much, but I don't know if they were talking about them at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was studying more, learning more. You know, I was copy and pasting things from the internet, downloading PDFs, and just furiously going after all this information. And I started to realize that you know, I now had information that I could tell Michelle, but she hadn't wanted me to talk. And
Mm-hmm.
so we had gone through emotionally focused therapy where we learned some language around, you know, our relationship. And so I went to her and I said, I am so lonely with the information I have. You can still go to church, you can still pay tithing, but I just need you to know what I know so that we can be on a more equal ground. And she chose me over the church, and she said she would. And she had been laid off because of COVID, and so it only took like 1 week. And 1 week she said, "Well, I don't believe in the church truth claims anymore." And she even said it's possible Joseph Smith was a fraud. And I was like, you know, I'm not sure, because I had wanted the church, the 100 things that I wanted was to go back to like the good things we learned about Joseph Smith and the
Yeah.
good things we learned about Jesus. Love your neighbor. You know, the glory of God is intelligence. Good books are all around us. Let's not limit our learning like it seemed like the church had been doing for most of my life. Let's expand our knowledge. Let's find out what the world says, and let's, you know, argue our case. You know, let's win, you know, win the battle. The war in heaven was an intellectual war about, you know, whether Jesus's plan or Lucifer's plan. It wasn't a physical war. It was like, let's
Right.
discuss all this stuff and then let's vote after all the information is presented. And so anyway,
So how long
you
had it been? Because you had been, how long had you been, I guess, kind of doubting or not going to
yeah, a
church?
long time. I was convinced that
Like 10 years, 5 years? Do you,
yeah, about 10 years, about
yeah. And it,
2010.
you just,
And she in a week, yeah, like that.
yeah.
She's kind of like she doesn't want to waste any time with,
Hmm.
you know, learning. I mean, that's not really
Yeah.
an
And
accurate description. But
right.
like once the
I wish,
51% hit, that was good enough. She didn't
yeah.
need 99%. Like
Yeah.
so many people we hear are trying still to look up information to try to prove the church true, even though
Yeah.
there's
Like
thing after thing
Sheena.
after thing, you know.
Yeah. We just interviewed Sheena. That was her thing. So I think that's fresh on the mind. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
And,
think when one spouse has already kind of started walking the path, like is the pioneer, the forerunner like you, I think that affords the, you know, the second one to really, if they're ready and if they're willing to kind of take that fast track. Um, so I think things could have been very differently if it had been her first, but yeah,
right. If
it's
she had
proud of
found
her.
out stuff while I just wasn't going to church, then I
Mhm.
would have been amazed, right? And it
Yeah.
would have taken me maybe a quicker out because being on the same page. In fact, the Hans and
Wait,
Birgitta
what
Madsen,
materials? Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, was it Mormon stories would she watch, or did she read the CES letter, or was it the gospel topics essays? Because that was a church
So yeah, we
source?
started actually with Cody and Leah Young's story because
Okay.
I had heard over a month and a half lots of stories, and I wanted to choose like a right order of things for her, and I picked
Mhm,
things that I thought would impact her more early so that she would be more accepting of other things.
mhm.
And Cody and Leah Young talked about how Leah wanted to help her friend who was beginning to have doubts, and she wanted to like prove like the CES letter wrong or something. Then the more she researched, the more she found out that there's more proof on the other side. But they still loved the church. They still loved the community. They loved, the lessons about Jesus, and they wanted to go. But she felt sorry for the people who, like her friend, were doubting, but were like, in a way, no longer welcome at church. So she created an online, a Facebook group or something, and maybe they did meetups of people who are doubting so that they can express themselves and have some cathartic, cleansing and discussions and support. So she
Yeah,
created a support group, and her husband ends up getting, involved in it as well. And he's the one that gets excommunicated. They don't excommunicate her, but
right.
because he gets excommunicated, they all decide to not go to church anymore or whatever. And I thought that story, if she was trying to be Christ-like and they end up
Yeah.
getting excommunicated, I thought that would be a good start. And then prior to sharing with Michelle, Hans and Brigitte Matsson's story was important to me because Brigitte was going to church while her husband had stopped because he no longer believed. And she said she went to church one day, and right in the middle of sacramenting, she decides, I should be with my husband. And I
Wow.
really wanted Michelle to feel that. And so when she saw that, she was able to feel the same thing and decide, family was more important. And so anyhow, that was how, she became on the same page. And she said at first, oh, well, she didn't know about our youngest because I didn't talk to her about anything yet. We were the two children that were staying at home, and I were kind of like whispering, like, "Ooh, look at this!" And she would
Mm.
hear John Delin's voice when I would be at the computer, like when she was
Mhm.
making dinner, and she would, hate the sound of his voice. And are you listening to that guy again?
I
You know,
know.
during the summer, and then it was at the
Yeah.
end of COVID summer where I shared with her, and then she was like, well, our daughter's coming to visit. Don't say anything to her. And so our daughter comes to visit, and she has 3 kids, and she comes, every summer to cool off. She lived in Arizona, and
Mm.
her husband was a teacher, and so it didn't really make sense for him to come at the time she wanted to come because school starts earlier in Arizona. And so
Okay.
sometimes he would fly and visit for a few days and then fly back and stuff like that. But so as soon as I go shopping with my daughter, because my daughter and I shop a lot, we like to bargain hunt and stuff. And I said, Mom doesn't want me to tell you, but you'll never guess.
Oh,
She
no,
doesn't believe
gee.
me. That's me. But don't say
You're
anything that I told
undercutting.
you. Yeah.
So,
And
I
so,
remind me, was your daughter, was she still believing at the
yeah,
she had
her
already
husband had gone on a mission to France in like just before they got married in 2009.
Mhm,
And actually he went in like 2006, and they became boyfriend and girlfriend right when Krista was choosing to go on a mission. And
mhm,
they were fall conference was happening in 2000, I don't know, 7 or something. And every talk she heard was, don't let anything stop you from going on a mission. And
uh-huh,
all the talks about don't let anything stop you from getting married, those are the ones he heard. He didn't hear those
uh-huh.
other ones, right? And so they each, like, I've got my answer. I'm going on my mission, right? And he's like, no, you're supposed to marry me,
Oh,
And she goes,
yeah.
nope. I'm going. And Michelle and I, Michelle said yes when she was 19, 3 days before she turned 20.
Mhm.
And later on, we decided to let our daughter know that that might not be the best thing. So she had a boyfriend when she was 18 or 19, and we're like, you should wait. We want you to wait. And she, did. That influenced her. And so
Yeah.
she left on her mission. She probably was 21, came back. She's 23,
22
about to be
and a half.
24,
Yeah.
right?
It's 18
And
months. Yeah.
so she now is ready. And so when she left on her mission, we invited her boyfriend to come over for Sunday dinners as a way
Mhm.
of, we're her family, maybe. And the first like 7 or 8 weeks, he was like, man, this is so hard to wait. And I think after, I can't remember what it is, like after 6 weeks, I said, 10% of her mission is gone already. And he was like, wow, that's a significant amount. Maybe
Yeah.
I can wait. So he
Yeah.
had to be like, what's his name that waited for 7 years before he could marry
Oh, yeah,
Leah.
luckily not that, right? Yeah, Jacob,
Yeah. But it
and
was
Leah and
similar. It was like
Rachel. Yeah. Yeah,
the 21st century version of waiting
right.
for
Like, I
his
can do
wife
it.
to.
But so if they didn't have their own, I mean, normally parents are really hesitant to tell their believing children when they're out. So why were you, like, wanting to
Oh yeah. So
for you
since
to
I
tell
started
her?
drinking coffee, so we're back to her husband. So
Yeah.
he was a good home teacher. They got married in the temple, and things were going okay with them. He did it. He was dutiful, and they had a daughter born on Mother's Day, I think,
Aw.
2010 or something,
Mhm.
and our first granddaughter. I took a photo. Sometimes it shows up on my Facebook page where there's 5 generations: my granddaughter, my daughter, my wife, her mom, and my wife's grandmother, all on the couch. And to me, like, that's a very proud picture. I'm so glad I was able to capture that
Mm,
moment, like it's a family heirloom almost, kind of a thing. And
yeah.
and but her husband was starting to get a little jaded about some things, right? Maybe it's hot in Arizona, I don't want to wear my garments, or this or that or the other. And then when they had their second child, he was holding his boy, and he thought, how could God tell Abraham, kill your son? And like in a week, he was atheist. So that was around 2014. And so once he became atheist, it was like coffee, I love it, right?
Mhm.
Bourbon,
Okay.
beer, I'm doing it.
Oh,
And
wow.
she had to go through that. So
Yeah.
she became my mom in a way at that point, where she had a Jack Mormon husband, right?
Mhm.
And so we would go visit, and when I started drinking coffee, Adam, her husband, was really happy. He was
Yeah.
pleased that he had a partner to share with some of his new enjoyments of life,
Right.
right? And he would talk about being atheist, and I would say, whatever arguments about, you
Mhm.
know, what's that? Not Occam's razor, Pascal's wager.
Mm.
And I would say,
Better safe
we
than
don't
sorry,
know, right? If we
basically.
don't know,
Yeah.
we're better off, choosing to be good and choosing to go to church just in case, right? And at the time, I didn't know. Derek, my son, later on told me that the real math, it's not like a grid, like, yes, there's a God, or no, there's a God. Yes, you should be good. No, you shouldn't be good. Or yes, there's a heaven, or no, whatever. It's really,
Yeah.
there's 3,000 gods, and there's 3,000 religions to go follow the path. And it's
Right.
like you have a 1 in, I don't know, it's 90 or 900,000 or 9 million chance that your religion and your God is the right one. So
Yeah.
Pascal's wager doesn't really work that well.
Right.
I
And
mean,
the assumption is a lot that you don't lose anything, which is that's the assumption I had, and, it's sometimes you have to come to be on this side to realize how much you do sacrifice and you do lose for nothing. And often it's family, which is supposed to be so important. So yeah,
And
yeah.
so even though I wasn't going to church and I was imbibing in some coffee
Mhm.
and some alcohol sips every now and then, you know, uh,
You're still defending. You're still
yeah,
got
I'm
some bit
still
of like faith
defending like God
position.
and Jesus and Joseph, right? Even though I had already
Yeah.
thought that the apostles and the leaders of the church had apostate. Oh yeah, and I was going to say around 2015, and being a modern Martin Luther, Jesus started a church, according to my knowledge, in the Middle East. It lasted like maybe 70 years. Then Jesus at the same time started a church in the Americas. And that only
Mhm.
lasted like 200 years, maybe
Yeah.
less, right? Why would Joseph Smith do any better than Jesus? And here it's been 200 years ago, about when the Mormon church was formed. Maybe the same thing's happening. That's the track record. You can't really have more than, like 5 or 6 generations be good, or something like that. And so it was like, it made sense to me that the church had gone astray. And people would say, oh, but there's a scripture that says the priesthood will never be taken from the earth again. And I said, well, you can have the priesthood without having a church. And they're like, oh, I guess you could. But, next, I'd just say that like after priesthood meeting to a confidant or something, And so
Mhm.
anyhow, one thing that I just want to bring up is my wife was so like a believer during the 2015 to 2000 years. I would find out when like war dinners were, like if it was a
Mhm.
Saturday at 5 p.m. or something. I had this job that I arranged to, work on Sunday so that I had an excuse, and Saturdays was a good day to work as well. So I'd head to work, and she thought that she could just go to war dinner, and I would show up
Mhm.
at war dinner, and Michelle would say, "You don't deserve to be here. You didn't go to church. You didn't pay the price the sacrifice that I have done. I
Oh,
deserve to go to the ward dinner. You don't." Everyone else in the ward was like, "Hey, Gene, how you doing? We're happy to see you."
yeah.
And Michelle was like, "You haven't obeyed. You haven't been dutiful," because that's like her
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah.
And
You
so,
haven't sat through the insufferable Sunday school lessons and,
yeah, I
all
didn't
those things.
deserve to have food.
Yeah.
I did nothing to earn it. She was
Yeah.
dutiful. That was her mindset. And so
You're
I
freeloading.
would laugh. I would laugh
Yeah.
at that, and
Yeah.
so look at all these
We
other
we
people that
left
are happy to
off
see
with
me.
your daughter because you had told her sorry, and then that was my fault. So you were in the store with her, and then we had to kind of say where she was
Yeah,
with
so we had to
her
backtrack
husband.
on why
Yeah,
where her situation. So she had
yeah,
spent 5 years or 6
okay.
years taking her
In
kids
this
to church by herself. Um,
yeah.
and and so I told her, and but she didn't change her too much because she hadn't heard it from Michelle yet. And so we went and visited, or maybe Michelle decided to have a call with her after she went back home,
Mhm.
and said, I have to tell you that I don't believe in the church's truth claims anymore. And she tells her the story of me sharing with her, and her, finding all this information out, and she'd be happy to share some of the things with Krista. And so that happened. And later on, Krista had a calling. She was in young women. She loved the sisters in her ward. She loved being in young women. She might have been the Maya Maids advisor or something like that. She loved serving people. She loved doing all those things. So she wanted to continue doing it, even though, it was COVID. So there was, it was a hit or miss, whether should we do it, an activity or not, you know, should we wear masks? Should we have it at people's houses because the churches were closed maybe at the time, And so it was easier to not do some things. And like a lot of people, she was noticing that it was just so much nicer to not have to drag the kids to church during COVID. It was like made Sundays better. They could go to the park instead or something like that. And so I asked Adam later what happened when Michelle told Krista that she didn't believe anymore. And he said, well, she still went to church, but the garments came right off. And that was
Yeah.
like really good for him,
It's
because
Arizona. Yeah.
it's Arizona. Like, why
Yeah.
am I in
That's
the
gotta be the place to
110-degree heat with extra clothing on, right? And so he thought that was awesome. You know, it was he was being blessed now for being atheist. And so, but Krista still did her duty. And so that's their story. Our other son had become who was going to chiropractic school, and he had a wife that was Brazilian, and she wanted to attend. You know, she thought I was a really bad influence on her husband because I was listening to these anti-Mormon things. And to her, I think that he was like a middle-aged teenager when she was baptized, right? And in Brazil, maybe she considered that like saving her from like life on the streets or something.
Yeah.
And she had allegiance to that. She
Okay,
also, Brazilians like to party, and being in a congregation with 40 other women, you have instant baby showers, you have instant, guest lists.
Connection. Yeah.
And there's lots of Brazilian Facebook groups in the Bay Area, and they are now in Utah. And so she does lots of the partying with the Brazilians, but also, she enjoys, inviting the sisters in the ward to her parties. And so, and attending the other parties. And so she still attends. Our son would listen. He would listen, and he took him a little while because he had gone on a mission to Rio, and he had, tried to convince lots of people that the church was true. And so he had a lot of the arguments, the what do you call them? Defenders of the faith.
Yeah. Just like the answers, just apologetic.
He had some of the answers, apologetics. He had some of the apologetic answers. And so, but after a little while, and because of COVID, he realized it was great to not go to church. They had a couple of little kids, and he didn't have to go. And so anyhow, I started noticing that in my friend list that some of the people that I was, I started friending. That's what I did. I started friending all the all-stars on John DeLynne's parade of stars, on his show, like Lila Tueller and Cody and Leah Young and other people. Hans Mattson even became my Facebook friend, and I was like, wow, they're so nice, and they're willing to, connect with some, newly, minted, Exmo or whatever. And then I would notice that there were some other people that I had, friends in common, and 10 friends in common, and, 20, and then 50. And I think Natasha Helper Parker or Anthony Miller, they're like neck and neck with the same amount of friends in common. I think we each have about 700 to 800 friends in common on Facebook because they, Anthony and Natasha, do almost like Mormon interfaith work, right? They hold space for everybody in their beliefs systems. Natasha just wants to help with, sex issues and other mental health issues.
She's a licensed therapist, And
Anthony Miller wants to help people with like spiritual issues. And so anyhow, around 2021, John DeLynne would have an author on. He would say, buy this book, and if you ever come to Utah, I'll buy ice cream. Or he'd say, we'll have an ice cream party. And so John DeLynne owes me like 3 ice creams and everybody an ice cream party, I'm pretty sure. So hopefully he sees this, and someday he can,
make good on that promise.
Pay his debt. is ice cream bets. And I know that Haagen-Dazs vanilla, I think, is his favorite. And so that should be the ice cream that is served. But anyway, one of the books that I somehow found was Writing Mormon History. And it was composed by Joe Geisner. He was the editor. And I was thinking of these ideas, like the CES letter book and some other books were influential to people, even Rough Stone Rolling. And I had these ideas. I'm an idea guy, and I was thinking of all these good titles, like which title can I actually say on air? No. Like a dumb God theory. A dumb God theory. What Mormons have to believe about God Adam in order God to theory. Stay, right? Yeah, play off the Adam God theory. Because if people will say like the Bible, the God of the Old Testament is like a horrible tyrant, and Jesus's New Testament God is loving and benevolent and wants everybody to get along, right? And accepting of people's faults, right?
Yeah.
And so similarly, there are these dichotomy situations where God doesn't love you unless you obey him, or he loves you, or faith without works is dead, or grace is sufficient for being saved, right? We're all saved by grace after all you do. But I finally came to the conclusion that the reason why Christians thought that Mormons didn't believe in the right Jesus was because their Jesus was powerful. You believe in me, you go to heaven. The Mormon Jesus was, I can't really do anything for you until you do all these other things. I would like to help you.
Yeah.
I'm not that strong to just do it for you. You have to do a whole bunch of the work yourself. And so that to me was like one of the tells of the difference between the Christian Jesus and the Mormon Jesus. And so that was in my mind. So I wanted to maybe publish a book. John talks about books. We should do more books. We should have, Dan Vogel should, all his books about Joseph Smith in the early days of the church should be a trilogy, and John Dehlin should promote it. And John Dehlin
you have a lot of ideas. I think for
CES
books, things you want to do, but also projects you want other people to do that they may or may not.
I have ideas for other people. That's what I'm best at.
And the connection, and that's really, it's kind of funny. We're coming full circle with like the Facebook thing from when it was new, and you were like, wow, 100 friends, and then now you've got this many connections, and you keep up with people. You keep things going. You find podcasters. You've just, I feel like you've just kind of naturally promoted and shared a lot of content. I think for a while. Is there a time you started doing that?
That is, in a way, I was planning doing something at some point, and I didn't know what it was. And I thought it never hurts to connect, right? LinkedIn, it's not what it's who you know. Those are things in my mind a lot, And so anyway, I called Joe Geisner. What the heck? I saw that he's on Facebook. And so I say, hey, we have, 15 friends in common, right? Let's connect. And how much did you get paid? So I have a call with him, a Facebook call. And I said, I'm interested. How much, what's the money? What's the sustaining value of ex-Mormon publishing or Mormon publishing? How much is it worth? How many books were sold? I wanted to know numbers to see the viability of, helping people publish books or publish my own or write one, or, am I going to become a millionaire like all the TBMs think that's what happens once you become Mormon? You're only doing this for money.
People just throw money at you.
Maven and I haven't seen any of that yet. But anyway, we are still going to labor in the vineyard until the fruit becomes sweet. But anyhow, so Joe tells me that he didn't make any money. They gave him a hardbound copy and a softbound copy. And he said, if you promise to read it, I'll send you the softbound copy. that I got,
Wow.
right? And so turns out he lives like 30 miles away from me in the Bay Area, and he sends it to me, and he spent like $7.38 to mail it to me. And I'm like, I could have bought one, I guess. That would have been, valiant of me, but bargains help, it was cool.
Yeah.
So I read the book, and it's like 15 essays, and from a lot of even faithful people. Brian Hales had his essay on polygamy, I think, in there, and writing his book, because it was about their experience writing the book.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, their experience creating something. So that's the connection right there.
Okay.
That is like the start probably of Latter Daily Digest, right? Where all these people are talking about their creative experience and what their story was behind authoring books in the Mormon spectrum. And so anyway, so I was learning that this was like in January of 2022, I think, that I finally did all that. And I found out that Mormon History Association was going to happen in the end of May. And, I thought, well, I'll go to it, right? But just prior to that, I had already been friends with some girl, some tech wonky person from Mormonism Live. I can't remember her name.
Yeah, I was on the scene at this point.
But I connected with her,
Yeah.
and we were friends. And I saw some guy had wanted to create something called Mormon Movements, and he wanted to do something around creating a Bill of Rights for missionaries. And like missionaries should be able to wear more regular clothes. Missionaries should be able to call home more, because I think at the time there was still just 2 calls a year when he first started. And
there were
so
healthcare concerns.
I don't know if it was Reddit or something,
I think it was
where
on Reddit.
he invited people to come. And so I was thinking, 20 people will be on like a Skype call, or what was the other thing? Not Skype.
Discord. It was on Discord, I believe.
Discord, right?
Yeah.
And he, come onto Discord, and we'll talk about it. We'll crowdsource this Bill of Rights for Mormon missionaries. And so I think, I might be able to say something here and there, and it turns out that this guy named Drew and me and Maven are the only 3 people that show up. And so I'm on my laptop in the living room, and Michelle's doing some chores around the house, and it's the evening, and I'm not wearing earbuds or anything. I'm just playing it loud, because I was, it was good enough, to be not disturbed too much.
Mm-hmm.
And Michelle, who had been, dutifully listening with me now to like Mormonism Live, and we'd go on walks and listen to Radio Free Mormons podcast. We were catching up to all the things that we'd been missing. And she peeks her head in the living room and says, "You're talking to Maven?" It's amazing. So because I was talking to Maven, my wife loved me more. And so that's all we needed from that. So I got to know Maven more, and we shared contact information. And
I think at this time I was also having a similar idea to you, as just noticing it was just tough to get started in podcasting, and I kind of really lucked out and kind of got launched by starting with Mormonism Live. But there were shows that I really enjoyed, like Ex-Molex, like Morgan with My Spiritual Life, that were these early influences for me. And I felt a lot of times they didn't get enough attention, and so I used to think sometimes it would be nice to have uh a show or something, do something to help kind of bring those up to connect with the particular audiences, because the big players are Mormon Stories and Mormon Discussions, I think.
they're
And
like
then
the
outside of
gorillas in the
that,
room.
yeah, yeah, and Exmolex has done really well for herself. I was with her when she was like early on, so I'm happy to see like that her channel, she's been able to get a good growing and a good following. And so but yeah, there's still so many. And so
And
yeah, I think
I'm
we were on the
sure
same wavelength.
you and I were discussing those things, of course, eventually I told people, yeah, Maven had nothing to do with it. It was all me. But I know that our discussions, did bring to a head thinking about it. So I decided to
I
go
don't
to
think we
this
were the only
Mormon
ones like to
association.
think it, but yeah, we were on the same wavelength. But it took some
Yeah,
time. It took some time. Yeah.
and Maven had already said that she would like to create content with me, which I thought was flattering. And then she said that she would like me to play a bishop and she could be the young girl going in for the interview. And I thought, wow, Maven wants me to do content with her. That's
I had
amazing.
to skit, yeah.
But Maven wants me to
Mine.
be a bishop, a Mormon bishop. Maybe not a good look for me, but anyway, someday we might do something like that. We'll see.
Yeah.
So
I
I
never got
decided to
into
go to
TikTok. Yeah, still haven't just yet, but
right. It's just
maybe,
something that
maybe.
I know is amazing, and people are getting like millions of views for doing little dances and also talking Mormon stuff sometimes, like roller skating in their temple clothes around the
Yes.
temple square.
I love her.
Yeah, it's so anyway, all these things were coming. I decided to go to Mormon History Association, and I invite myself into Maven's life. I say, Maven, is it okay if we have a meal while I'm visiting Utah for Mormon History Association? She says, okay. So I come and I have a briefcase and I start showing her things and I start telling her all my crazy ideas. And Maven, what were you thinking back then? Were you like rolling your eyes and thinking, what
No,
have I gotten
I
into?
don't remember. Honestly, because I feel like I think I can relate because I always have a lot of ideas too, and sometimes it's difficult to get them narrowed down to a point to sometimes start a project, and that's kind of what happened with Latter Daily Digest. It took me a long time. I held it up quite a bit, I think, when you were ready, and so eventually, and part of it was I think I initially wanted to have more more control and more input and ownership over it, and I just wasn't able to, and I think it was one of the best decisions I made was to actually just really hand it over to you to be the main, driver behind it, and then that's when it finally was able to, like, to get going was
Yeah, I'll
was
tell a little bit more about that, but I won't get into too many
yeah.
details except for I have a funny story around that. And
Okay.
so
We're
anyhow,
at the 48-minute mark, so
yeah,
just
we
putting
get
that
we
plug
have
in there.
yeah, we have avocado toast together for breakfast, and
Right. Beans and brews.
Lila Tuller was my friend, and I said, Lila, wouldn't you like to have lunch with Maven and me? And she says,
Now
yeah,
I'm being used as a pawn.
yeah. And actually, this is even before we had our first meeting. I was like almost driving on the way, and I'm trying to figure out how to do this. And I say, Maven, do you want? This is before I even ask if we can have a meal together. And you want to meet Lila Tuller, and
And I
neither of
did.
you had said yes yet, except
Oh.
for to me, except for yeah,
Oh.
I want to meet that other rock star, right? Dean is just like a conduit. It's like I'm setting up this power lunch with Lila and Maven, who are fans of each other, right? And I'm the guy that's connecting them. I'm doing the Gene Judson thing. In Facebook, I had grown my friend base by connecting
Mhm.
people, right? And so,
Yeah, because it wasn't just you connecting yourself, but you do make these kinds of connections between people, and I think that's
right,
very valuable.
and I
Yeah.
think that I share photos of events with people I see, and I might not be friends with them, but I send them, photos of Mormon History Association, and then I've given them something, and so they go, okay, I'll accept Gene's friend request. I know who he is. He went to Mormon History Association. He must be a good guy, right? And so then we have this lunch with Lila, and we have decide on Sunday, and the places I want to go are closed, and we finally arranged to have
Oh, yeah.
Thai
Yeah.
food.
There we
That's
go.
one of the reasons I'm
Another
here.
circle.
Everything connects.
Yeah.
Everything connects, right? There must be a God. No, I'm just kidding. But so anyhow, there must be humanity, right?
Yeah.
And so we have this lunch. It's awesome. Maven's always busy, so she takes off early, just like Maven does, and I get to share
I think I'm still
mango
working. I
sticky
was working
rice with
nights.
Lila. Yeah,
Yeah.
you were working. You had to go somewhere,
Yeah.
and you said, oh, you didn't eat like everything. You wanted a sushi roll, a veggie sushi roll, and I should have got the clue, but I said no, order it. You take it, have it for lunch on your shift, because I wanted Maven to think Gene Judson's an awesome guy. So anyway, and so I do the Mormon History Association, make some more contacts, get my picture taken with Patrick Mason, and some other people. And I actually told Patrick, I said, Patrick, I miss you from appearing on Mormon Stories. I hope that you can, work things out with John or whatever's happening. But I value what you bring to the table when you appear on the different shows. And, Mormon Stories has a big audience, and I think it would be good. And later that summer, not only because of me, but one of the voices, maybe, John invites Mason on, and they bury the hatchet or whatever they needed to do. And that happened. So I feel like I helped a little bit, right? It wasn't, none of them said, oh yeah, Gene Judson made this happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I had my little piece.
Yeah.
I had my little piece in there.
You participated in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that made me feel good. And then I did Sunstone, and I volunteered for Sunstone and sat at the front desk, and RFM was coming, and I took all the lanyards with the name tags of all the famous people. I took their picture, and I was handing them out and meeting people there, and got my picture taken with RFM and other things. And then the next year, 2023 happens, and I'm building up. I might have like 1,000 Facebook friends that are ex-Mormon at the time. And Maven moves to India, but we were still talking. Maven and I arranged to talk once a month for far too long as far as Maven's concerned, but I enjoyed every second of it. And then I come up with this idea while Maven's in India, and she says, I'm in India, maybe you can hold it off. And I use AI to create, these materials, and I'm sending to her, and Maven's starting to think, oh, she's not pulling her weight. She's doing all this work. And I spent,
I felt bad.
I was like, Gene's doing prompt.
And I'm just like, I'm not ready. I don't have time. I can't do it. This isn't, and so,
and then Maven having her own issues. And I'm thinking, oh, Maven's losing interest. She's not responding. And we already had an agreement that she didn't have to respond to me right away. But I thought, well, maybe since we're partners in this thing, she was going to respond more. But being in India and all the things that she had to do, just wasn't working.
Yeah.
And
sometimes, I mean, we talked about this, but it also tends, when I start to get the sense that I'm really dropping the ball and letting somebody down, it gets harder for me to communicate. Because
I was missing
my sense of failure. And so, so it's just kind of
I was missing signals on that. I was thinking that Maven was losing interest and other things. And Maven wanted to come out hitting a home run. She wanted to just like knock it out of the park. But she had all this experience popping in on Mormonism Live, being around all these big players and stuff. And I was just shaky little Gene Judson, and I wanted to do something. So I designed the logo. I got things going, and I thought I need practice. So I had been on Steve Pineker's show right after I did Mormon History Association and Sunstone. He invited me to share my story of my very first, experiences there. And I got to share some of my story on his podcast. And so Steve had asked me like a whole year before, so when are you going to start your own podcast? And I was like, soon. So like a year is soon enough for me. So I invite Steve to do like a practice show. So Steve, come on, do a practice show with me. And so I interview him about creating his channel. And it was pretty good. Steve is a pretty good guy behind the camera and the mic, and it had better than just practice quality to it. I was stumbled on asking some of my questions. I think I had a list of questions that I was like, I think I had them posted so that I could move the thing
Steve's
along.
A good guest. Some guests are good and can carry, I think, conversations or interviews, and others need more help. Yeah, and Steve is a good one.
Is enthusiastic, and he was sharing my excitement for doing this, and he was excited for me, and he was like pumped that we're doing it, and we do it. And Maven's still on her way back, traveling across continents, and I just figure I got to do something, so I post it. We can't knock it out of the park with 3 viewers, with 3 subscribers, right?
Yeah.
Well, we might as well start something, and I can invite people.
I think Steve didn't know you were going to do it, right? He
didn't know I was going to publish it. He's like jokes at the beginning, like nobody's ever going to see this, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that made it easy to do. It made it easy to do, right? It was like no pressure, right? So Maven was traveling, into London. She was going to be there for a week, and I wanted to get things going so that things can happen. So I publish it, and got a few viewers. And I was thinking that Maven was losing interest, and then I was watching Mormon News Roundup, and D-Vase blindsides Maven with a question about, so I hear you're on a new podcast. Yeah. And I was thinking that Maven was losing interest, and all of a sudden she says in like a minute and a half, 10 times better than I could ever tell anybody what we're doing, what we're trying to do. And then Maven gushes about me a little bit. So I make sure I want everybody to see that. So I clip it. I ask D-Vase if it's okay to clip it. So I start sharing that as a way of gaining subscribers. Like, see, Maven does know who I am. I wasn't joking with you. I wasn't trying to.
You weren't the friend that's like, she's really my friend. She
really is.
But she left her sweater right here. She's coming back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She really, I'm not lying to you. I know
you're
Maven.
Not making it up.
And so I was able to get that clip and use that to promote the show. I could send it to people and say, hey, Maven and I started a podcast. But at the time, I had forgotten a lot of things that Maven had done with me. So I was like, I started a podcast and Maven talks about it. So I don't know, maybe I was in my feelings a little bit, because I wasn't sure. And from the beginning, Maven said that she'd be busy. She wouldn't be able to help. And so she wanted me to develop other co-hosts. And that was part of the whole thing from the beginning. And we were able to get, I had met Summer at the Bill Reel event. And she was beaming. It was like her first Exmo sort of event where she could meet people that were questioning, and and at various stages
of us.
And so I became friends with Summer, and then she came to Sunstone a few months later, and Michelle said, Summer my wife Michelle started making these 3x3 watercolors to give to special people. And everybody needs to know the most special person that got the very first one that Michelle made. And I had some hand delivered to Maven. Maven got the very first one. Lila got the second.
Should I go get it?
What?
We can pause.
Yeah, I'll go quick,
grab it.
And I'll talk a little bit more. And so my wife Michelle has painted maybe 3 dozen of these little watercolors. I've given them to like Bill Reel, John DeLynn, Gerardo, people that have appeared on Mormon Stories that are all-stars. And so I gave one to Michelle, and we're at Sunstone. I gave one to RFM, and that's how talented my wife is. So I would be giving them out, and people would think, what a good guy Gene is, because he gave me this special art. And I that's part of my MO. I do things for people by having other people help them sometimes, and I get the credit because I kind of set it up. Like the Lila Maven.
It works. And so
that's sort of what I do. And so Maven is also experimenting with doing her own things at the time. She did something on Bill Reel's Mormon discussion because the Michelle Brady Stone thing was happening. And
oh yeah, I just had to share. Yeah, I was like, I need to, yeah.
And so Maven talked for about 36 hours about all the things that he did. And
yeah.
and so
and that wasn't meant really for a wide audience. That was really just for like the fans that to get our side of the story. So I knew not a lot
Mormonism
of
Live
people
fans
would want to listen. Yeah, it was drama. This is the drama llama train.
And then at the same time,
I did the collab with Peter.
Yeah,
Peter
because what's his name said to Michelle Brady Stone that she was going to hell if she didn't.
Yeah, Brian Hales.
Brian Hales was kind of rude
had
to
to
her.
talk about that episode. And it fit with it because Peter Bleakley's, it's the Mormon Civil War. That's what he focuses on. And so that was a really perfect, kind of a microcosm.
Battle. One teeny battle in the Mormon Civil War. It was perfect fodder for you guys to talk. And it's really hard to get Peter talking. But it's even harder to shut him up once he starts.
And me too, though. That's why we filmed for like 8 or 9 hours and we got it down to like 6. And that was a lot of work. But
and so I'm going back and forth with Maven and we do a couple of shows and things are going okay. And we interview Summer Rain and Summer kind of spills too much tea. And we have not aired that episode. And it was a great episode. Someday we hope to air it. But anyhow, she might have gotten into too much personal details about things. And so we thought it'd be better to hold off
before
on that.
She was ready. Or so, maybe she was ready, but I think other people.
And so that was the plan. Summer was going to be an often co-host and things were happening. And I'm lining up things and we're going to do a podcast finally with Maven on. And Maven's equipment doesn't work. And then, with the Mormonism with the mirth, but from Mexico.
Exactly.
And so we do that episode.
This name of his podcast is in Spanish.
So it's Viejas de something or whatever.
De Fe. I feel really self-conscious now that I don't.
So
and I
hope
we can redo that one still. I'd love to have him on again. Yeah.
And then Maven and I do an episode that went longer than we thought. And Maven thought, well, it should be trimmed, but then Maven's busy and she has to edit. And Maven and I both, I think, have this. If we're going to do a big project, we kind of have to have no distractions. And it becomes on the back burner, And so then Maven starts to feel bad and that she's not chipping in, she's not pulling her weight or whatever. And so I start to do more podcasts on my own. And then things are happening and we finally have a talk in the beginning of January and Maven says, I felt really bad and it made me like crawl in a corner or whatever. And I said, Maven, here's what I want from you. I want you to be like the diva, right? That shows up to the performance drunk and never doesn't go to practices, doesn't go to rehearsal, but shows up and knocks it out of the park every time. And then nobody sees you for a few days, right? And so they wonder if you're going to make it to the next show. That's all I want. That's all. That's the minimum requirement.
And that's kind of what I've lived up to, unfortunately. But I that helped me to feel less, just less that I was failing or letting you down and holding things up.
Right.
So
it was
good. It was
a
good negotiation.
Managed expectation. And so anyway, so it's been, but I still had a lot of interviews that I had scheduled and Maven maybe didn't have the time or I scheduled on times she wasn't available. So in February, I was doing a lot of interviews and then we've just been a lot busier lately. And so everything's been going good. And Oh, that's the one thing. The only one thing I regret is when Maven and I were having these struggles. I had interviewed RFM with Summer Rain after I did a Meet Summer Rain, and we exploded. So RFM announced on our show, our tiny little 125 subscriber show, that he was starting 2 new podcasts, not just one. So I was able to do like breaking news and headline, and it blew up. And at the same time, I released it like 2 hours before his Christmas Eve special, where he had a star-studded panel telling their stories. And Maven was kind of sick at that, and she was going to be a big part of it.
I got RSV right at the end of, like, right at the holidays. Yeah.
And so that was another thing that happened. Like, I felt so bad that Maven wasn't, sharing in this like amazing thing that was happening to our channel. In 2 weeks, we tripled our subscribers, and luckily I was able to say the right things to her when we finally had our call that softened her heart, and we got back together in a way. And I tell people that we laughed, we cried, and we hugged all over the phone at the end. And so it worked out really well, and it's been so awesome. And then another thing that was awesome is Maven wasn't going to go to Thrive St. George, and then she posts on her Facebook page, guess who's going to Thrive St. George last minute? This girl. And I'm like, I call up Maven, when are you landing in Las Vegas?
I flew into Las Vegas. Yeah, that was
because I knew she had to go to Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, that's the easier airport to get to.
And she said, and she could have gotten there at 10 in the morning or 2:30 or like 8 at night. There were the only 3 ones, right, or something like that. And
the only 3 flights in and out of Vegas
for the price that would be good for John DeLynn to offer to send you to. Yeah, because John DeLynn graciously says you got to go.
Yeah,
and so I said to Maven, guess who's driving right through Las Vegas at 2:30? Because she said she was landing at 2:30.
Yeah,
Michelle and I. We can take you the rest of the way. And Maven said, well, I had a ride, but it was unsure. But now I know that you're going to be there. So I even took a picture from a gas station in Las Vegas while we were gassing up for the last leg. And I was tracking the flight. That's what I can do good as well. And I took a picture of Maven in the air coming in for a landing while we were at the gas
plane,
station. Yeah. And so that was kind of cool. So by the time I get to the airport, Maven's getting off. We only had to drive around a couple times before she came out.
And they were really militant about you not staying, right? I think
you can't. You got to move the truck. Move it along.
Yeah.
And so Michelle and I got to take Maven to dinner, and then we had a nice trip up there, and we got some good pictures with John DeLynn, and we have the Ladder Daily Digest gang of Summer and Maven and me and Michelle. Michelle says, well, I'm not really part of the gang. It's like, you're a big part.
Michelle's part of the gang. Yep.
Yeah.
She is.
And so anyhow, it was an awesome experience. And I think that fired you up a little bit too. That whole
I think in general I had a rough holiday season, I think, with the illness, and then some personal family issues, and then there's some mental health issues. So it's kind of a long slog there for a little bit. And Thrive was when I was starting to like finally kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe that's the wrong metaphor. but I was starting to feel like Maven again. Finally. And it was really nice it's nice to see people and meet people, and it did kind of.
Yeah. And we, and I think it also kicked your brain in gear to think about other things. And the one thing about our call in January is I told Maven that I wanted her to be the best Maven. And if that meant going to Washington, D.C., and I don't know what your first trip was supposed to be. Was it a pre-meeting, or was it going to be another demonstration?
Can't remember. It was the first trip I was going to go. And I don't know if I want to put this up, but it was going to be a protest.
Okay.
For reproductive rights.
And whatever. And she was thinking that maybe she shouldn't go. And I said, just go. You represent thousands of women, and I want you to go, and so we'll talk about the rest of that story later. And then the same thing that in a way.
And that was the boost I needed. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was in a really rough point then. Yeah, I was really struggling. And so that
And
was a
just
really
like
meaningful
Patrick Mason
conversation.
getting on John DeLynn show,
Mm.
um, me encouraging you helped you get arrested 3 months later.
Eventually, yep. Yeah.
And so,
I think we're kind of I think we're towards the end to wrap up, but I want to wrap up with I think what happened most recently. And I I I'm trying to like get the words for it. I just love that you've made these connections and you're asking people to come on our show. We've had people on that have had much larger channels obviously and followings. I think most of our guests initially because we were we started off from nothing just like anyone else. But no, you sent me a text just the other day. You just dropped it real casual, like and I think you had said something like I was talking with Lupe on Facebook and she gave me David's publicist info, so I sent an email asking him to come on our show. I copied you in it. And I remember having my phone and just looking at that and I was just it was just so funny to me. So I called you and I was just like, okay, this Lupe as in David Archuleta's mother, we're on first name basis is here. We're just
that's
we're
right.
gonna ask
I
him
chose to
on
not
our
use their last
show,
names.
on our 700 subscriber show, but I loved it. I mean, because I feel like as Maven, I have just a lot more. Um, I just audacity and bravery and to live the kind of life that I never really could when I was ATBM, and so I just kind of felt like I've landed in this place where I'm authentic to who I am, and I'm not scared of people, or I'm not scared of things, or even if I am, like I do what it takes. But then, but I would never have tried, and I've got connections that I know like that are closer to David, but I just thought that's too far away. There's no way, and and I still felt that way, but I
How
was just
audacious Jean
tickled.
is.
Yeah, that you did it. And I was just like, yeah, you know what? Why the fuck not? Why not David Archuleta? Like just go and ask him. I found it really endearing and also really inspiring. Like you never know. And I like I said, we did get a very nice response back from the publicist who said, David is working on a book and other musical projects and he's not available for appearances right now, which is very nice, very professional. But I kind of feel like if I know Gene, this is not the end.
Not the end.
You're gonna find us some way to ingratiate yourself with that publicist, and I look forward to David Archuleta coming on our show. Maybe our
Yeah.
1,000 subscribers
And
special.
and as a teaser, coming up probably in the beginning, first few days of May, we are scheduled to have Alyssa Grenfell come on the
Yeah,
show. And she has gone from 0 to 6,000 miles an hour.
yeah,
I think she only started her YouTube channel, at least doing a lot of things like in December. She's already at like 100 and something thousand subscribers. She's going to like
yeah.
pass
She's
John
done really
DeLynn by the
well.
end of the year. And she is totally not only pulling back the curtain, but she's like investigating all the knobs and dials that the man behind the curtain is twisting. And she is just she is shining a light of truth that is just incredible, and it'll be fun to get her on. And then maybe David Archuleta will
Yeah,
say, "Wow, if you can get
yeah,
Alyssa Grenfell, you guys must be somebody." And so anyway, that's that's the story of deconstruction and the creation of Latter Daily Digest. And you know, it's been
thanks for
like
coming
a
along for
fun
the
journey.
ride.
It's not
Yeah,
over. And I am
nope.
so honored to have Maven as my partner. It's like I have to kick myself. Like, am I dreaming or whatever? And so many people do. And I just want everybody to know that we actually could use some support. We say like and subscribe, blah, 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 and there
Yeah,
we have a tip jar at the bottom of our description. But who clicks on the descriptions? I don't remember clicking the descriptions very, very often when I was consuming, Mormon stories or other things. And so,
I sometimes do, but
yeah,
yeah, sorry. Go
but
ahead.
like for us, like we rely on it. And that's one thing about Latter Daily Digest. We try to include parts of people's stories where they were influenced by other podcasts, and so we try to provide links. And so if you haven't already, in some of the shows that you've watched, click the description, see what we have. Sometimes you might enjoy what other people have mentioned, in their our interview with them. And so anyhow, it's been great, Maven, working with you, and I look forward to many, many hours, no days, no months, no years, maybe, of working together. And so I'll let you wrap it up.
Thank you, Gene. All right. Thanks everyone for coming along. I know we had a lot of really great comments from you guys from Gene's part 1. So I'm glad you came back for part 2. And yeah, and we wouldn't be here either without the community and without our supporters. So we appreciate you guys when you come into the chat and when you participate with us. And there's certain names that are really familiar. You guys keep coming back, and we really appreciate that. So thanks again. We'll see you for the next one. Bye, everybody.